So what we want to do today is let you know who the foundation is and what we do. And I'm having trouble advancing there. So we hope that at the end of this hour, you'll be able to answer those two questions maybe better than you can right now at the beginning of the hour. So we've been around since 1974. We're a 501c3, which is a nonprofit corporation. We're classified as a public charity. As I mentioned, we have a 23-member governing board. They're all volunteers, except, well, there are 3 staff members that are trustees. And as a public charity, we can serve as a trustee of funds where necessary and custodian of accounts that benefit United Methodist Ministries, churches, agencies, institutions, and other ministries. As of now, we have over $130 million in total assets under management. So that's who we are. What do we do? Our mission is stated as to create a culture of generosity that transforms the world by raising, managing, and distributing funds that serve the needs of all people and all communities. So what we're going to do today is, this is really set up in 3 sections about raising funds, managing funds, and distributing funds, and how we live into our mission, both by working with individuals as well as working with churches and other ministries and institutions. So our mission to individuals, so this is Joe and Darnell Long. Joe is a former chair of our board, and they are donors to the foundation. They have a scholarship fund and a donor advised fund, and they're a good example of how we help individuals, because it's primarily through a ministry of educating about planned giving. And when I talk about planned giving, I'm talking about giving that comes out of our accumulated resources. So in our churches on any given Sunday, or online on any given Sunday, there's an opportunity to give our tithes and offerings. And that is usually, those gifts are usually coming out of our income, our salaries, wages, retirement benefits, Social Security. We have money that comes in and money that goes out. And that's where our regular tithes and offerings come from. Planned giving is out of accumulated resources. There are many different types of planned gifts, and we could do a 3 or 4 hour seminar on the different types of planned gifts. But suffice it to say, that's not our purpose today. So suffice it to say, what we try to do, what Kim and I do when we work with individuals, is try to match their need to give under whatever their circumstances are with the needs that exist in ministry, in the ministry or the church that they love and want to support. So the types of planned gifts, the most common one is a bequest. That's a gift that comes from your estate through a will or a living trust. But that's not the only type of planned gift. Many of our largest assets are not governed by the terms of our will. They're governed by beneficiary designations. So retirement accounts and life insurance, other types of accounts will often have beneficiary designations. So this is a way that people can make a gift to benefit a church just by completing that beneficiary designation, maybe making the church or the foundation a partial beneficiary or a contingent beneficiary in the event of the death of the primary beneficiary. There are also life income gifts. These are charitable gift annuities and charitable remainder trusts. We have some people on this call today who have established charitable gift annuities with us. And what those are, they provide income during the individual's lifetime that's based on a rate that is tied to their age at the time of the gift. That's usually pretty favorable. And then at the end of their life, what's left in that will go to the ministry that they have requested. And then there are gifts of appreciated securities. We have a discount brokerage account, and individuals can very easily, technologically, it's not difficult to do, transfer securities online through our account information. We have many donors who do this every year just as a pass-through. They will pay the next year's tithe this year by sending it to the foundation. We convert it to cash and send it back to their church. As I mentioned earlier, we can act as a trustee when necessary. So some of these life income gifts are charitable remainder trusts, where we are the trustee of these funds. And we like to work with individuals along with their other trusted advisors and their family, so that we make sure, as I said at the outset of this section, that we're helping them to match the gift that makes the most sense under their circumstances. We like it when the family's involved so that there aren't any surprises at the end of someone's life. And this is our mission to churches and other ministries. First of all, when we help those individuals who end up making gifts to their churches and other ministries, we're helping the church kind of indirectly. We're helping to increase their endowment funds. But we can also, when churches already have established endowment funds, we can manage those funds for them. And Kim will be talking more about the management of funds. And we like to help churches create a culture of generosity by creating an environment where endowment giving and planned giving is part of the regular conversation around stewardship. Sometimes we get so focused in the local church, because I'm in a local church, and Kim is in a local church. We get so focused on this year's budget and this month's heating bills that we sometimes don't want to look long term. What we have found is that when churches have regular programs when they have an endowment, number one, and when they have regular invitations to increase the endowment, that increases all giving. It sends an important message to the congregation that they're planning for the future. They plan to be here for a while. And so we can help churches. We provide training in all areas of stewardship, generosity, and planned giving. And as I said earlier, I like to repeat it because we help individuals explore their planned giving options under their specific circumstances. So if you take anything away from this presentation in regard to how we work with individuals, it's that idea of their own circumstances and how we like to work with them, see what their needs are in giving, and what their loves are in terms of the object of their giving, and then to include the church in that conversation to make sure that there's a good fit there. And we like to help create environments in local churches that encourage planned giving. So we have a lot of uh, tools that we can give local churches and other ministries to help build that environment so that planned giving is the kind of message that people may not hear unless they're thinking about, well, like Gwen and me, we have our 60th birthdays coming up, and Alicia just had hers. So we're beginning to think we're approaching middle age. Maybe we should get our affairs in order. And maybe that planned giving message that's in the bulletin that says, have you remembered such and such a church in your will? Maybe that'll resonate with me. And it's been in there every week for 25 years, and I've never noticed it before. So those are the kind of things we like to help churches do. So we've talked about raising funds. The second prong of our mission statement is managing funds. The first thing I want to say about that is that we invest in accordance with the social principles of the United Methodist Church. And I'll have a separate slide about that. But what that is talking about is investing with values other than the bottom line investment dollar return. We think it's important because of who we are that we put that bullet point first, investing in accordance with the social principles of the church. Kim, it looks like you're unmuted, so.
I'm unmuted. I conquered that mouse and I'm back. Sorry.
Back.
I did want to mention that if you do regularly or have people in your church who give to the foundation through the gifts of securities, because of the merger of a couple banks, our information has changed. So please do contact us for up-to-date information. I just wanted to mention that during the questions and was silenced. So I will continue with managing funds. There are layers of accountability in the implementation of our investment policy. We do have an investment policy statement that's approved by the trustees and that we implement it with them. It provides for a reasonable return without unreasonable risk. It is for long-term investment, and it is a fairly conservative investment policy. We do partner with Westpath Investment Management. If the name sounds familiar, it's because Westpath is the investment arm of the United Methodist Church. We hired them through an RFP process because of their commitment to sustainable investing and their quality returns. And we're grateful to be in partnership with them. They manage over 40 different investment money managers in different styles of investing. So that creates for us and for those who invest through us a great diversity of investments, which is an important aspect of investing. We do have an annual independent audit. It's done by Brown Edwards, which is a large regional firm. Every year we have a clean audit. We think that's important for us and important for you. It is available on our website. If you ever want to see our audit, you can go to umfwv.org and there's a section called Finance, and it's under that section. I did want to mention also that one of our layers of accountability is our investment committee. We do have a board of trustees. Jeff will talk about who's on that board. He's mentioned some of the members already. Part of that board of trustees is an investment committee, a finance and investment committee that monitors the investments with Westpath and hires and fires our investment manager and makes sure we're adhering to our investment policy statement. Part of investing through the foundation means that you are investing in a way that's sustainable. Sustainable investing is part of our DNA. Before I worked here, I was in science. I was a research associate with Marshall. So science metaphors are in my DNA. So I do like to say that part of our DNA as United Methodists and as the United Methodist Foundation is that we manage in a way that is in accord with our social principles. The first part of sustainable investing is negative screening. We avoid investments in companies involved in, there's 6 things listed here: gambling, tobacco, pornography, alcohol, weapons, or private prisons. They have to not have a significant portion of their income originating from one of these 6 fields of work. We don't invest with them because of who we are. And Westpath, that is part of who they are, screen out these companies or investments in these companies. Secondly, the rest are active. We are active investors. We're involved in advocacy through Westpath. We intentionally invest in companies that have a good track record of how they treat the environment and the social positions they take and good governance. But beyond that, we engage with companies to help them improve, to help change the world through the way we invest our funds. So we work with other United Methodist investors and other like-minded investors. When people get together, they have a lot of power. And when we get together with other people who think the way we do, we can engage corporate leadership and change the way they act. And that's an important part of sustainable investing. And if you think about Wesley's rules of life, one of them is to do good. And that is one of the ways our investments do good. Fourthly, we're involved in positive social purpose lending. That's part of our fixed income branch of our investing. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we provide funds for construction and rehabilitation of affordable housing, community centers, things that improve the way people live. And some of those are in West Virginia. So that's important to us, and we believe it's important to you as a church investor. I want to talk about the types of accounts at the foundation. You'll see that there are 3 listed there, and they have arrows in between them, but that's kind of a visual metaphor for the idea that it's a continuum. We work with churches, we work with investors to build an account that meets the needs of your particular church in your particular context. I'll talk about these 3, but know that we design those accounts to meet your needs. On the far right are custodial accounts. Those are usually what are called on-demand accounts, where the entire market value of the fund is available for withdrawal at any time. For example, if a church needed to have a new roof in about 5 years, they might start putting money away and investing it. It's a long time, so they have a long-term investment account that helps them to grow the funds they have and to create a way for people to contribute to that fund so that in 5 or 10 years, they can replace the roof. They might have reserve funds and they want to invest them and put them away for when the roof blows off and there's a need for funds to replace it, that they don't want to take out of general budget expenses because that would wreck programming for the year, but they want to put the money aside in a way that grows in the market, hopefully grows in the market, and that would be available for them down the way for the unanticipated expense. For example, a church in the northern part of the state had their boiler go down and they needed to heat, this was before the pandemic, they needed to heat the sanctuary because people are cold in the winter and they need to have heat. So they called the foundation. They knew they had an account. They said, the estimate says $30,000. That would ruin our budget if we had to use our budget. Do we have that in our account? And they did. And they called back in a week and said, it's going to be 40. Do we have that in our account? And they did. By having the reserve fund, they're able to fix the boiler, withdraw the funds, and continue ministry. So it's a way to plan for the future that you do anticipate and maybe that you don't anticipate. On the other end of the spectrum, on the far left, is an endowment account. An endowment account sets aside money for future ministry. The principal isn't spent. The income that from that principal is spent for ministry. So it becomes a perpetual resource for ministry. An example of an endowment account. If you've been to annual conference or you've looked in the annual conference workbook, you may have seen the guidelines for the Virginia Higgins grants for churches. Those are for ministry with people who are differently abled or for seniors or for children. Churches and other ministries can apply for grants from the Virginia Higgins Fund. Well, Virginia Higgins was a person. She left a bequest to the foundation, to the annual conference that is placed in an endowment at the foundation. It was around $1 million when it started. It has spent over $1 million in ministry, and it's valued at over $1.5 million now. That's how an endowment works. It's a perpetual source of funds for ministry, so the ministry can continue way into the future. Many individuals set up endowments for their churches or for their other ministries. In between is a hybrid account. A hybrid account usually acts like an endowment, but has what we might call an escape clause. So a church might create a hybrid account. They want a fund that will act as an endowment. They set it aside. They aren't going to spend the principal. They're going to use the income from ministry, but they know that someday that roof might blow off, and there might be uninsured costs associated with replacing it. So they want to be able to access the funds. So it's a way to create an account that serves both purposes. You're transparent with your congregation to explain what it's for, that it's for future ministry or for emergencies. And the foundation can help set up an account that will do that. It might be that the hybrid account has higher gatekeeping mechanisms for withdrawals. Maybe it requires charge conference approval or a higher percentage of the administrative council to remove the funds. There's just a difference in any of the fund is available at any time up to the hybrid, which makes it a little more difficult. The church chooses how, but it's a little more difficult. All of the accounts have custom designed agreements to meet the needs of the church or the donors. As I mentioned before, there's a wide diversification of investments. They're invested in hundreds of different stocks and different types of investments. We'll talk about our 4 different investment funds. Our funds do have a low fee. It's 75 basis points, which is 3/4 of 1% of the market value of the fund in the year. It's divided out over the entire year, spread out, so it's not one cost at one time, but it's taken out of the returns that the accounts earn, not an invoice you receive. And we've already talked about sustainable investing, how we invest as an alliance with the social principles of the United Methodist Church. We do at the foundation offer 4 investment funds. When you travel with Jeff Taylor and you do presentations with Jeff Taylor, you learn to tell Jeff Taylor jokes. And the Jeff Taylor joke here is that they are named after vitamins: A, B1, B2, and B3. Churches and donors can choose the fund that best meets their needs and their goals, or a combination of them. And it's not a permanent choice. You can always change your mind as needs change and as you want to move from one fund to the other. Fund A is fixed income. That doesn't mean it earns a particular return. It means it's invested in fixed income vehicles like bonds. No stock in Fund A. B1, B2, and B3 are named B because they're balanced funds. They have a percentage of stocks and a percentage of bonds. B1 is 40% stock, B2 is 50% stock, B3 is 65% stock. With the idea being that if stocks do well, bonds might not, and the opposite, so they're balanced funds. I do want to mention that none of those funds, none of the investments in the foundation are insured by the federal government. We are not a bank. We don't have FDIC insurance, and they are all market-based. So having said that, let's look at historic returns. These are you'll see 4 columns of returns here. I do put the 2020 returns because I want you to see them, but I also want you to look at the 10-year average. I want you to see historic returns, which might be a better tool to use to choose an investment fund than last year's returns. We won't look at all these numbers. They're there if you need them. And I would also say that as the returns change every quarter, every month, the quarterly returns are posted on our website, so you can always go look at them as they are updated. So let's look at Fund A because it's different than everything else, and B2 because B2 is the most common investment fund at the foundation. Of our 130 million, probably 90 to 100 million of it is invested by us or by the donors or churches in B2. So for Fund A, last year had a 3.5% return. That's in the white bar on the chart. The blue bar is a benchmark. That's a market-based index for comparison that has the same kind of allocation that the actual fund does. So you compare apples to apples there. Our goal is to beat the benchmark. So for Fund A last year was 3.5%. The 3-year average was 2.79%. So that means of the last 3 years, 2018, 2019, and 2020, It earned an average of 2.79% each year. We take the return for all 3 years, we average it together, and we get 2.79%. 5-year average is 2.7. The 10-year average is 1.75%. So on average, each of those 10 years, it earned about 1.75%. So Fund B, the one that's invested 50% in stock and 50% in bonds, last year's return was very high, 16.7%. Not our highest return ever, but it is up there. The 3-year average is about 10%, 10% each year of those 3 years. The 5-year average is around 10%. And the 10-year average from 2011 to 2020 was 6.9% on average each of those 10 years. Those returns are net of all fees. I talked about the fee. Anytime you see returns published by the foundation, they're always net of fees, which means the fee has already been deducted. And these are the returns that hit the account that can be spent by the church.
Okay, let's move on into the next section, which is really the so that of the foundation. We talked about raising money and managing money. We do those two things so that we have money to distribute to expand mission and ministry in the name of Jesus Christ. It's often, I say, where the rubber meets the road, or as like I said, the so that. So the first thing I want to say about distributing funds is from the endowments, from those permanent funds that are given to the foundation to benefit particular churches and ministries. The way we determine what amount will be distributed is by taking an average amount, which is averaged over 12 quarters, and applying a percentage of that, which is 3.5%. The law changed in 2006 and encouraged foundations like ours to come up with a distribution plan that allows those who are the beneficiaries of the endowments to plan better, because the old-fashioned way of making distributions was to distribute only the interest and dividends. And with the historically low interest rate environment that we've been in since the early 2000s, since the early 2000s, that often meant that a church might have a $100,000 endowment and they might get $100. And that's not really helping. That's building up the foundation in terms of assets under management. But we see the distribution as being the main object of raising and managing. So there's got to be a better way to do it. So the 3.5% figure was chosen because it allows for a reasonable distribution. So that church that has $100,000 in endowment is going to get $3,500 per year. But if you look at those historic returns, I think B2 had an average of, let's just look at what it was. So 6.92% over 10 years. So we're distributing about half of the return. That allows the endowment to continue to grow so that the distribution keeps up with the inflation. This 3.5% figure is reviewed periodically by our investments committee and the rest of the board. It was just reviewed last year and continued the same amount, 3.5%. But we'll continue to, maybe that'll go up 0.5%, or maybe it would have to come down, because we always want to have a reasonable distribution that still allows the underlying endowment fund to grow over time. In 2020, we distributed just under $5 million. And These are in those distributions from endowments, also the distributions from custodial accounts, which were, the demand accounts. Kim mentioned briefly the foundation grant program. We have a grant program that is funded by 10% of our revenue. So when we do our budget at the end of every year, we're on a calendar year. So we do our budgeting for the next year at the end of the current year. We anticipate what our revenue is going to be. And we put 10% of that into a grant line item. We have a competitive grant program where people can visit churches and other ministries can visit our website, get the application, complete it online, or print it out and mail it in. We have the deadlines posted there and the guidelines. Essentially, our board is hoping to fund through that process new and emerging ministries that are geared toward helping the community, that are outward focused, not typically for the church's own inward ministries. And we've found we've been doing these grants for several years now, and our process is improving. We're learning more about how to make grants, and the applications are improving, and the word is getting out that we have funds, and so churches are prepared to file the applications. And we've seen a lot of really creative things come up through this grant program. We'll be meeting as a committee within the next couple of weeks for our first 2021 round of grants. The first deadline was at the end of February. So the next deadline is June 30th. It's on the website.
It's July 31st.
July 31st. So keep that in mind. In addition to that grant, and that's about a little over $100,000 that we make available. In addition to that, we're careful not to have too much in reserves. We like to have one budget year held in reserves in case there's ever a pandemic or an insurrection, that things come up that could affect funding. And so we think it's prudent to have some reserves, but our board watches the level of reserves. And when we get too much money, we start looking for a need. And so in addition to that competitive grant program, there are other things that we have funded, such as in response to the 2016 floods, our board set aside $300,000 to help churches with uninsured property losses. More recently, this past year, in response to the pandemic, we set aside $100,000 for the bishop and cabinet to use to help churches that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. So our board is really dedicated to the idea of granting funds from our own money, and it's only because of the generosity of so many individuals over the years and the trust that churches and other ministries have placed in us that we're in a position that we can give back that way. And then we also use our own funds to provide leadership training in all aspects of stewardship and generosity. So in addition to Kim or myself meeting with church groups or Sunday school classes or men's and women's groups or youth groups to talk about these things, we have regular programs of stewardship where we bring in outside experts, and We have an academy that we're planning in October that was postponed from last October to March to October. And it looks like we're really going to get together at Canaan Valley Lodge. So watch for information about how you can register for that. This is the staff of the foundation. We're a staff of 4. You've met 3 of us this morning. Susanna Carpenter is our CFO, and she's a CPA, and her in-laws have joined us today. Dayton and Barbara Carpenter are with us. And here's a picture of our Board of Trustees from 2018. You know, the pandemic has affected our ability to meet, and rather than show you a screenshot of half of the people on a Zoom call, we have an older picture of our Board of Trustees. The chair of our board is Lynn Dotson, who is retired from the WVU Foundation. He attends Suncrest Church in Morgantown. You met our vice chair who's with us this morning, Cheryl Davis. And Cheryl is at Elizabeth Memorial here in Charleston, a retired lawyer. Bishop Sandra Steiner Ball is the honorary chairperson of our board. The bishop under our bylaws is the honorary chairperson. And all of the bishops since I've been involved at the foundation, which goes back to 2003, have taken that role seriously. We covet the bishop's participation in the leadership of our board. It helps us know what the needs are in the conference and how we can best dovetail our programs and our distributions to meet those needs. And so we really appreciate her part in our board. And that really concludes the planned portion of our time together. We've had some good questions to this point, and you might have other good questions now. Here's all of our contact information.